got that money on my mind. I'm thinking money all the time. I got that money on my mind. I'm thinking money all the time. I got that money on my mind. I'm thinking money all the time. I got that money on my mind. I'm thinking money.
Good morning. Welcome to Crossroads. My name is Jameson. I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm really excited that you joined us, whether it's here or online, as we wrap up our series, Right on the Money. Is anybody besides me going to miss that bumper video when it's gone next week? I just get stuck in my head. I actually play it for our staff meetings sometimes. We just sneak it in there in the awkward pauses. It's amazing. We've been having some fun with this topic because if you haven't noticed, talking about money is kind of stressful. The topic of money can be very uncomfortable for many of us. Because for a lot of us, it's one of the things that matters most to us. It's often involved in our biggest dreams, and it's often a large factor in our biggest insecurities. Talking about money tends to expose what we trust in, and that's why money is such a sensitive topic. But what if there was a way to reduce the stress that we feel when it comes to money? What if there was a way to set our hearts free from the consuming worry about not having enough? What if we could just be done with the pressure and all the anxiety around our finances? Well, there is a way, and we all know what it is. We could be free from all of those things if we could just win the lottery, right? Isn't that what we kind of believe in our culture? We've all daydreamed about things how it would change if we just suddenly hit it big. Whether it's the lottery or just a big inheritance out of nowhere, there's Hallmark movies about that. We think that if I could just become rich, it would fix all of my problems. Never mind that a lot of the lottery winners, it actually ruins their life instead of saving it. Never mind that the more money you have, the more stress you experience as you try to manage it all. But we still think becoming rich would fix our problems. But we all know it just won't. But there is a better way, and we can experience less stress around our finances. We can be free from controlling worry when we learn to handle money God's way. And that's exactly what this whole series has been about. Because when we get right on the money, it makes a huge difference for the rest of our lives. And that's why we've been examining these 4 principles to handle money God's way. Identifying our idols, giving God's way, defeating debt, and then this week we're going to talk about our 4th principle, we save in the right way. These are steps that are foundational for a life of financial freedom. And saving for the future is a powerful principle. Einstein once said that the greatest mathematical discovery of all time wasn't E equals mc squared. It was compounding interest. And yet many of us struggle to save. One study from last year across the generations said that on average 28% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved up for the future. That's a hard way to live. When the smallest unexpected expenses comes up, it can devastate you financially if you're not ready. And if we want to be free from some of the stresses and the pressures around money, and if we're going to handle our finances God's way, then an important part of that journey is to spend less than we make and save for the future. Proverbs tells us this. It says, 4 things on earth are small, yet are extremely wise. Ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up their food in the summer. The Bible reminds us that life is full of seasons. There are seasons of abundance like summer, and there are seasons of deficit like winter. And just like the ant in summer, if you are in a season of abundance, you should be saving for the future, because it's not always going to be that way. The ant shows us that saving for the future is wise. Now, even if you feel like the ant, you don't feel very strong, you don't feel very significant, you don't feel like you have a lot of means financially, you can still save little by little, and you can still store up for the future. Saving is actually the opposite of debt, right? Last week we talked about debt, and we found that it is buying something now with money that we hope to have later. That's what debt is. See, debt presumes on tomorrow, while saving prepares for tomorrow. We can be more prepared for tomorrow with our savings. Because none of us know what tomorrow is going to bring. Saving recognizes that I shouldn't spend everything I own because I don't know what's coming next. And while we've all dreamed about getting out of our problems by suddenly coming into a large amount of money somehow, the principle of saving shows us the real path to financial freedom. Proverbs 21:5 says this, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." It's the consistent, the diligent work towards a saving goal that brings prosperity. And not trying to get rich quick. To help remember this point, I want you guys to remember Bobby Bonilla and the New York Mets. Bobby Bonilla was an all-star player for the Pittsburgh Pirates in the late 80s and early 90s. And in his later years of his career, he bounced around from team to team, but in 1997, he helped the Florida Marlins win the World Series. But by the year 2000, he was an aging player for the New York Mets. And he had a $5 million contract left. But the Mets wanted to get rid of him. And they didn't want to have to pay that $5.9 million. You see, the owners of the Mets, they were involved in this financial scheme that they promised to receive double-digit rewards. It was run by a guy named Bernie Madoff. And they were, somebody knows that. And they were convinced that in a very short amount of time, they would just be raking in the cash from this scheme. So while the owners of the Mets were worried about getting rich quick, or I should probably say getting richer quick, Bobby Bonilla was thinking about the future. So Bobby Bonilla, he negotiated a deferred buyout. That meant that he wouldn't get any of his money from the New York Mets for 10 years. Then starting in 2011, the Mets would pay Bobby Bonilla a little bit at a time each year with 8% interest. So instead of one $5.9 million payday, Bobby Bonilla waited 10 years to start receiving an annual check of $1.2 million every year until 2035. That's 25 years of getting a check for roughly $1.2 million instead of a $5.9 million payout. We can all do that math real quick, right? That's what compounding interest will do for you. And while Bernie Madoff, he died in prison a few years ago after working the largest Ponzi scheme in recorded history, and the former Mets owners, they did not get those double-digit returns that they were promised. But now on July 1st, every year, Major League Baseball celebrates its biggest holiday, Bobby Bonilla Day. This is the day when the Mets, they still write out that check for $1.2 million to Bobby Bonilla every year, and he's been out of the league for over 2 decades. And that $1.2 million is more than a lot of players make in the major leagues right now. Because hasty speculation and trying to get rich quick, it often brings about poverty. But taking the slow and the steady approach, following a diligent plan, that can lead to prosperity. Now, Bobby Bonilla, he might be a multimillionaire, but he still shows us that savings grow little by little. Trying to get rich quick is a trap. It's the plans of the diligent that lead to profit. It's the hard work, it's the good planning over time that brings prosperity. And as a good general rule of where to start, it's by giving away your first 10% of your income. That's the tithe that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And then you save the next 10% of your income for the future, and then you live on the rest. It's even better if you give more and save more, but the 10-10-80 plan is a great starting point. You give 10, you save 10, and you live on the rest. If we could all just start there, it could change so many things in our lives. I personally am very thankful that my dad instilled this principle in me at an early age. I should say, I'm thankful now that he instilled this principle in me at an early age. Because at the time, I didn't really like it that much. But in my defense, it wasn't a 10-10-80 plan, it was a 10-90-0 plan. I gave 10%, I saved 90% for college, and I had nothing to spend. Not that I had anything to spend it on really anyway, I didn't have any expenses. And to top it off, my dad's workplace was really close to our credit union that we used. So I would actually give him the money to deposit for me on his way to work. Now, most people think that's him doing me a favor, and it really was. But at the time, it felt like he was trying to keep an eye on me, which was probably a good thing. But at some point, I decided that I was going to try to hold something back. Just a few dollars. It wasn't going to be 10% or anything that big. And I did it, and I got away with it. So I continued to do it for a while. But then I got a little bit greedy. I took a shot at holding more money back. However, as it turns out, my dad is actually quite good with math, numbers, and just deductive reasoning. And he noticed that I had been working more, but not saving more. Okay, my dad was maybe just observant. But he asked me if I was sure this was all the money I wanted to put in the bank. And I was trying to say, yeah, that's okay. And I tried to lie about it, but it didn't really go well. And eventually it's like, no, there's more. And I gave him the rest of the money. Now it was back to 10.90 for this guy. But it was okay because I was grounded. I couldn't spend money anyway because internet shopping hadn't been invented yet. So I'm that old, right? But because of this upbringing, combined with learning to practice the 4 principles of identifying our idols, giving God's way, and defeating debt and saving the right way, I have been able to hold money loosely. I'm not claiming that I'm perfect. I still struggle in a number of those different areas. But saving for the future, it is important. But today we also need to address why saving for the future is so dangerous. I know, right? Total plot twist in the sermon. Did I just spend all that time trying to convince you that you need to save for the future only to now tell you not to? No, that's not what I'm saying. Because saving is important and we should all be doing it. But we have to make sure that we're saving in the right way. Because saving can be dangerous as well. To see what I mean, let's look at an encounter that Jesus had with a man who was unhappy with his inheritance in Luke 12. Jesus was teaching to a large crowd, and we'll pick up the story in 12:13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" So this guy is not happy with how his parents' estate is being divided up. Now, at that time, typically the largest share would go to the oldest brother to keep the family wealth together and the prestige intact at this time. But notice his brother, he's not asking Jesus for a fair ruling. He's actually not even wanting to hear Jesus' thoughts or opinions. He's just telling Jesus what to do because he wants to use Jesus to get what he wants. Jesus is not his real God. Jesus is a means to serve his actual God, which was money. And this is a warning to us. In a financial series, one of the temptations is thinking, okay, if I just handle money God's way, then he has to bless me financially, right? But if we think like that, we're putting ourselves right in that same camp with this guy in the passage. We're asking, how can I use God to serve my actual God of money? But Jesus refused to help this guy serve his idol. And instead, he used it as a chance to teach his disciples. Look at what he says in verse 15. Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." He told them this parable. "The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.'" Now this guy, he has a perfectly natural dilemma, right? He has come by his wealth honestly. He probably worked really hard for this moment. And he's actually making a really smart financial move. Instead of just flooding the market with all this grain in a bumper crop when it's not worth that much per pound, he's going to store it up so that he can sell it later at a higher price. It's actually a really smart move. Another smart move is that instead of digging up his farmland to build additional barns, he's tearing down the old barns to rebuild bigger ones so that he doesn't reduce the farm's capacity to produce crops. This guy is a master at saving. He's a master businessman. He's making all the right financial decisions. Except as often happens in Jesus' parables, there's a twist in the story. Verse 20. "But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God.'" This guy has made every right decision financially, so it seems, but he still ends up getting called a fool because he fell into the trap of greed. And in this passage, we can learn 3 dangers for saving. And the first danger is hoarding wealth for yourself. Hoarding wealth for yourself. Our farmer in the story, he never thinks about anyone else. When he talks to himself, there's about a dozen references to me, myself, and I, and even a you as he's really talking to himself there. This is a danger for us. The more successful we are in life, the more we look around at our houses and our cars and our toys and our bank accounts and we think, mine. These are mine. Look at what my hands have earned. Look at what my hands have built. But actually, this isn't just a rich person problem. There's a ministry that works with the homeless community to equip people to help get them off the streets. And they said that when they see a homeless person who is pushing a shopping cart full of these old possessions, or if they have all of this stuff that they have to take with them every single place they go, often those are the hardest people to help. Because while they don't have a lot, those possessions are their last feeling of security, and they often won't give them up, even if it's to move towards something better. All of us can struggle with clinging to our possessions. Think about the rich farmer. He made all the right decisions, but he morally mismanaged his wealth. Because as a first century farmer, this guy lives in an intensely connected communal culture. And he's only thinking about himself and how to maximize his profits. But what is something else he could have done with this extra harvest? He could have given it away. He has way more than he needs. And as an early church leader named Augustine, he observed this about this passage. This is what he said. He, the farmer, didn't realize that the bellies of the poor were much safer storehouses than his barns. Hoarding wealth for ourselves is dangerous because at some point in this life or at the end of it, we're going to lose everything. Everything we stored up for ourselves will deteriorate. There'll be taxes, changing markets, unexpected bills, health challenges, natural disasters. Anything that survives that will be given to somebody else anyway when we die. Everything we hoard, we will lose. And the more tightly we hang on to it, the more painful it will be when we lose it. Are you falling into that trap of hoarding wealth for yourself? If so, there's only one solution. You have to balance saving with giving. This is the only way to battle that self-focus is to give money away. That's why we need to practice giving God's way, and then we balance saving and giving. That keeps us from focusing too much on ourselves. We talked about this in depth a couple of weeks ago, and I encourage you to check out that message online if you missed it. How are you doing when you compare your saving and your giving? Maybe for some of you, you need to start doing both of those things. Or maybe you realize that you're diligent about saving like the rich farmer, but you're only focused on yourself. Or maybe you're in a spot in life where you've saved all you need to save. I think it was Mark Batterson that shared that as he and his wife save for the future, their goal is to continually increase their giving so that as they save what they need. One day they're hoping to be able to give away 50% of their income and then live on the rest. It's an amazing goal. But they didn't stop there. Once they reach that goal, because they're planning to, once they get there, then they're going to work towards giving away 70% of their income. And once they get there, they're going to work to get to 90% of their income, where they give away 90% and they live on 10%. Those are staggering goals, right? How do you need to balance your saving with your giving? There's a second danger of saving that this parable reveals. Let's look at verse 15. Jesus said to them, "Watch out." Now picture yourself at a baseball game, and our guy, Bobby Bonilla, he's up to bat. And he just hit one of his 287 home runs. The ball is in the air, and it's coming your way. You heard the crack of the bat. The crowd is cheering, but you're talking with your friend on the side. You have no idea where it's going. But then someone says, "Watch out." What do? You take action to protect yourself, right? That's the idea here. Watch out doesn't just mean be aware. It means you take action because you are under attack. You are in danger. But what's the danger? What are we under attack by? It's greed. All kinds of greed. Greed is coveting. Greed is a persistent feeling of discontentment that always leads to needing, wanting more. In our culture, our hearts are under attack by consuming greed, and we need to take action to defend ourselves. Jesus says that life does not consist of an abundance of possessions. The second danger is looking to wealth to find life. We need to actively protect ourselves against the temptation of looking to wealth to try to find our life. Now, the Bible uses different words that are all translated as our word life. There's bios, which can refer to the possessions of life in general. Then there's suke, which is kind of like the soul. It's the word for myself in verse 19. It could also be identified as like our goals, our values, our commitments. But then there's the word that Jesus uses for life in verse 15, which is the word zoe. Zoe is the abundant spiritual life. It's the eternal life that can only be experienced in a relationship with God. And this guy, the farmer's problem is he's trying to find that Zoe kind of life in his bios kind of stuff. He's looking to his bios, his wealth, his success, his possessions here on this earth to fill his need for Zoe, a deep relationship with God. He fell for the lie that stuff can fill the emptiness in your life. But it just doesn't work. I think we've probably all tried it from time to time, and we all know this truth, that it doesn't work. But sometimes we just keep trying to do it. Look again at verse 19. He says, "And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." Do you realize what that is? That's the American version of retirement. This is our dream. If I just work hard and I save up enough money, one day I get to retire. And I can have plenty of things stored up for many years. And then I can sit back and relax. I can do what I want to do when I want to do it. All I have to do is save up now to enjoy a life of leisure and recreation later. That's this guy's dream. That's a lot of our dreams too. Now, it is okay to retire, and we should be saving for those years because as we get older, we all know that you can't work at the same pace as when you were younger. And it's good to rest. Jesus tells us to do that. And it's okay to enjoy life, the good things that God has given us. But the American version of retirement is all about pleasure. It's about golfing and vacation houses and travel and sitting back in leisure and recreation. And all of those things are okay as long as that's not your whole life. Here's how you can know if you have the right attitude about retirement. Ask yourself, is your view of retirement consuming or is it about contributing? Is it all about pleasure or is it all about purpose? This is where our rich farmer went wrong. Rest and leisure was the goal of this guy, his life. It's the life he's been living for because he's been deceived. He thinks he can find that Zoe kind of life in his bios kind of stuff. And we all know that never works. But the solution is to make retirement about contributing, not consuming. That's how we win retirement. It should be about contributing, living a life of purpose, not just consuming to live a life focused only on ourselves and on our pleasures. And I'm thankful to say we have so many good examples in our church body. We have 2 retired people that serve as small group leaders in Rush. We have a handful of retired people that serve as life group leaders in our church. And we have retired people also going on mission trips as well. Specifically, I think about Judy Herman. She's 85 years old. It's okay, I asked if I could tell her that, say that. She's 85 years old, and she is a great Rush small group leader. She might even be the most beloved leader that we have. She also serves faithfully in our connections team and our counting team. But even more so, she is active in the lives of her grandkids and her great-grandkids to make sure that they feel loved and cared for and that they are pointed towards Jesus' love. I think of one of our elders, Mike Bueller, and his wife, Brenda. When Mike and Brenda retired to a community in Arizona, they didn't retire from serving Jesus. Mike has taken over all of our communication with all the missionaries that we support, and he does that as a volunteer. He does an incredible job. The people that he supports, that we support in the field, they know that they are loved and cared for because Mike is in constant communication with them. He actually spends more time serving the church now than before they moved. But not only that, Mike and Brenda have also started numerous groups in their home. They evangelize their neighborhood. They build into marriages. They mentor other people. And they also serve regularly at their church in Arizona. They've even helped them launch a new campus. These people are contributing. I also think of Sue Orada. Now, she's not retired just yet, but it's near on the horizon. She already serves at a high level in our church as a life group leader and on the connections team and a few other different places. But as she nears retirement, she's asking the right questions. How can I serve God? What else can I do that would help people draw to God? She specifically asked me how she can get more involved in community outreach. And I know that's not the only conversation she's had. She's had multiple like that. She recognizes that retirement is a blessing, and that blessing should be used to bless others. I also think of the mission trip that I just went on to Argentina. Out of our 11-person team, 7 of them were 65 years old or older. 6 of those 7 are retired, and 3 of those 7 used wheelchairs to get through the airport so that their legs were ready to go once they hit the mission field. Now, I will admit I had a little bit of questions about that and maybe some doubts. But when they got to the mission field, man, they were fantastic ambassadors for Christ. They were powerful missionaries. They have an excuse of why they shouldn't go on the mission field. But instead of looking at excuses, they found a way to still be there. They found a way to still serve and honor God. God's version of retirement is all about impact. It's about the contribution that we can make in a new season. It's not simply consuming to live a life of leisure and rest. But there is a third danger of saving. This is another lie that the rich farmer bought into. He's worried, he's stressed. He's thinking if he just had a little bit more, if he could just build his barns a little bit bigger and store up all this grains, then he could relax and find that peace of mind that he has been craving. But it's not going to work. And I know that because of verse 16. It says he's already rich. He already has an abundance of goods and crops stored up. He has multiple barns full of stuff, and it hasn't given him peace yet. He thinks if I could just store a little bit more, then I'd have peace. And that's our third danger, is believing all you need is a little bit more. We always just think we need just a little bit more. We're all vulnerable to this. Having enough is like a moving target, right? Most people never reach it. Because as soon as you get there to whatever goal you've set for yourself, you realize you still don't have that peace. And then you think, okay, I set the goal in the wrong spot. Maybe it's a little bit farther over, and I just got to keep pushing for it. This truth kind of hit me out of nowhere when I was growing up. As a kid, I loved Legos. Now I know that the plural of Lego is actually Lego or Lego bricks, but where I come from, we just call them Legos. And when I first started playing with them, I had to ask for them for Christmas or for my birthday, which made my collection take forever to build. Because I always had to get socks and underwear for Christmas, so that took up some slots. So I started with just a handful of sets, and I loved them. I played with them all the time. But then I got older, and I started receiving an allowance. This was a game changer. Now I could buy my own Legos if I saved up for a while. But again, what else did I have to spend money on, right? So my collection started growing even faster now. And then I got my own job. Now I had more money for Legos. Although you'll notice the story that I started with kind of conflicts with this one, and that's part of the reason why I got caught. That's not the point of this story. It was about this time that I started to not feel quite as excited about Legos. Initially I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm just growing up. I am a junior in high school after all. But it wasn't until years later that I looked back at my Lego journey and I noticed a direct correlation between the number of Legos that I had and the amount of enjoyment I got out of them. The more sets I got, the less fun I had. When I was in that journey, I was confused because our world tells if something is good, more is better. And if I'm having fun with this small amount of Legos, I should be having a lot more fun if I double it or quadruple it. But it simply turned into the more I had, the more I wanted, and the less satisfied I was with what I had. A lot of us are like that way, or are the same way with our money. The bigger our pile of money gets, the more secure we expect to feel, the more peace we expect to feel. But we just don't seem to achieve that level of peace and security that we expect to. Because money is not fulfilling. Because you can never have enough money. And if we're going to get this right, there's something that we need to know that this guy in the passage missed. Look back at verse 16. In the very first line of this parable, notice what Jesus says. the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Who or what produced the harvest? It was the ground, not the man. The rich man received an abundant harvest. He can't take credit for it. And in verse 21, Jesus explains his problem. He stored up wealth for himself, but he wasn't rich toward God. Notice the difference in the focus. His primary direction for his life was for himself instead of being focused on God. What is the direction of your focus right now? This guy is making all these plans. He's making really shrewd business decisions, except he fell into the worst financial mistake you can possibly make. Because a fool's plans don't go past the grave. And if you're going to avoid believing you need just a little bit more, the solution is to make God your goal. Our direction and our focus should become more and more towards God instead of more and more on us. No matter how much money we have, whether we're living paycheck to paycheck or whether we're sitting pretty good, we got to put God first, not just in our finances, but in every area of our life. And when we do that, we can save for the future without being overcome by greed. Now, as we close out this series, I want to invite you to consider, what is your next step? One message series is probably not going to be enough to transform how you handle your finances. It's just a start. You need to take the next step. You need to go deeper with this. Maybe today, maybe you need to start saving. Step one is just to set up an emergency fund. Get $1,000 saved for emergencies in the future. Then work to get out of debt. Once you do that, then you can work to get a bigger emergency fund. And then you start saving for major purchases and thinking about saving for retirement. Most people find that they can save better if they just make it automatic. They just have an automatic withdrawal from their account every month. That helps them to stay consistent. Which of those steps do you need to take? Maybe for you it's a little bit different. Maybe you need to start giving so that you can balance your saving with a focus on God. Or maybe you really need to get out of debt right now. Or maybe you just need to get your financial life surrendered to Jesus. But what is your next step? If you're ready to make some changes and if you'd like some help, we would love to sit down with you. We would love to talk through what God might be doing in your life. Maybe what a next step is for you, or just to help you get started. And if that's you, you can text the keyword money to our number on the screen. This is a great way to dive deeper into these concepts that we've been talking about in this entire series. We would love to have that conversation with you. But most of all, maybe your next step is just to pray to God. Just ask Him for help. Ask Him to show you what your next step is. And we can do that right now. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for your message. Thank you that you have given us the blueprint on how to handle money your way. Lord, you knew from the start that money was going to be a big stress and a big challenge for us. And Lord, we love that you taught us how to do it well. Lord, please speak to each one of us and let us know what it is that we need to do. What step do we need to take to put you first before our money so that we are honoring you with our entire lives, our money, our actions, everything. Lord, please do a big work in all of us and help us in this area. In Jesus' name, amen.